believe it or not, I got to thinking. How many times you ever found a dead bird in the yard? All the birds that are out there, you know, they got to die. Huh?
When they hit my patio.
Yeah, we have that. We have about one of those a week. But, you know, you just think of all so they return somewhere. You know, of course, there's the coons and the possums and all that. But eventually they all return back to the earth and all the animals in the jungles and all of the rest. So one of the things I wanted to mention again is that, you know, that when God created, he created them according to what? Their kind, which is their genus, you know, like felines, canines, equines, and all the other equines out there. So, you know, we talked about that before, and that's also something that's going to carry through on the ark. You know, they came 2 by 2 according to their kind. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that every kind of feline that was on the earth was on the ark. But we'll talk more about that when we get there. But that's one of those things in which some people call not creative evolution, but something along that line. That most Christians do believe in a form of evolution. Not that everything started with one cell from the primordial sloop, from the explosion and the cooling of the earth and all those things, but that all animals started with, you know, all canines started with something, you know, whatever kind of canine it was then, and became all the different dogs that we have today. And some of that we see around us. You know, you have breeders that developed breeds, and not just in horses and cows and chickens and just about anything else that they can do that in. So somebody commented on my shirt, said Tim the Tool Man. So, and I see who you are. But anyway, you know, so did God make the earth full of creatures, or the sea full of creatures, or the air full of creatures? No.
Told them to produce.
Nope. Yeah, he tells them, you know, go and populate and all of that. So, you know, the whole idea that God said, and then there were animals everywhere. And of course, at this time, we still believe there was one land. You know, not all the continents that we have today and all those sort of things. So it would have been easy for things to spread out. What's one other way that we haven't quite got to yet, that we might believe in a certain kind of evolution? The creation of people. You know, we don't know what Adam and Eve looked like, but we know how all the different races and things that we have today, and all of that. So everything was created according to their kind, and according to their species. It was the same thing with the trees, the birds, all the creatures in the sea, and all of those things. And God said, let the land produce them, and it was so. You know, and it just makes you wonder, did they kind of go out of the dirt, or just how God did that, or whatever? But to me, that'd be interesting to see. So what all kind of animals do you think there were at this time?
Wild animals?
Well, there were wild animals, and there was livestock. It says that. And
what about dinosaurs?
How about dinosaurs? They're probably dinosaurs. You know, one of the things with one of the views out there, or from a creationist standpoint, is that, or from a lot of church standpoint and all that. I'm not going to speak for everyone in all the churches and things, but if you're looking at it from creationism, and especially, you know, what we talked about, what they called old earth. You remember there was young earth. That was, you know, every day of creation was 24 hours. The world is only 6,000 years old, and all that. Then there's the old earth, that theory that says that all these things happened. Everything matches what we get taught about how the world became. You know, the Big Bang. First there was light, then things started to gel together, and as all those things occur. So in the old earth view, we don't know how much time was between each of these things. And we talked about that word day, yom, Y-O-M, that is in the Hebrew, that can mean a day, a 24-hour day, or it can be used like back in the day. You know, everybody talks about back in my day. Are they talking about a single day? No, they're talking about an unspecified period of time that's back there somewhere. Or, you know, even kids talk about in the day of the dinosaurs and all that. And man, I'll tell you what though, it's kind of cool. It's been about 4 weeks ago, they had a big thing up across the street from the fairgrounds with the dinosaurs and all and the areas they were supposed to come, and different part, you know, part of it was Argentina and part of it was a big drive-through thing, and all we heard for 45 minutes was dino, dino, dino from the 3-year-old. But it was cool. And he was so excited, and Gil's lap was almost black and blue. He was jumping up and down on his bench. But anyway, so, you know, people that dispute about dinosaurs and all those things, you know, that dinosaurs were there. Now, the thing that's always interesting, and even my son was talking about it in the car that day, there was a couple of them, they said, we think they look like this. Or one of them, all they had was a shoulder joint. And they built a dinosaur as big as this room from that shoulder joint. Now, it might have been as big as this room, but how do you really know what it looked like if all you have is a shoulder joint? Some of them had feathers, some of them. And one of the things I think is really interesting, I was telling him that I read not too long ago, I don't know, 6-8 months ago, that now the big theory is that none of the dinosaurs were green. They were more likely blue. And I'm thinking, God, that'd be cool. Now that looks like a 3rd grade or a 3-year-old to put that together. But there are some people, and you can find out about this at like looking up some of the stuff in the Creation Museum and all those sort of things. There are supposedly evidences in the fossil, what they call the fossil records, in which there are dinosaur footprints and human footprints in the same fossil area. So, of course, you know, the evolutionists say, well, the dinosaur imprints were made first, and then millions of years later, the others came up. But the creationists say, no, they were probably made at the same time. So, if that's true, when would we have lost the dinosaurs? Do you think? Anybody want to take a guess? And then we'll quit talking about dinosaurs. Do you think they can swim? Some of the ones in the ocean could. They had some big ones in the ocean and things. And some people think they're still there. You know, who you talk to and where you see. But most of the big ones, they're kind of big to get on the ark, and they probably couldn't swim. That's what happened to unicorns too, in case you didn't know. So, now back to reality. You know,
I'm not saying that about unicorns. I'm thinking of dinosaurs.
Okay. You know, to say that there's no such thing as dinosaurs, or dinosaurs didn't exist, or anything like that it doesn't say here what God made. The creatures of the ground, the creatures that walked on the earth, and you know. Now, some of these, like I said, where they just got one shoulder and they made others, but there's some that they have full skeletal, every bone in the skeleton and all of that. So, I believe they were there. They were created just like everything else. And you know, the other part of it is we don't know what else might have been created back then and all of that. But all animals came from the dust. God said, "Let them come from the dust." And they did. And was it good or bad?
Good.
Even the snakes were good. So, this is before the fall. So anyway, and so God made. Now there's a difference, you know, and that's verse 29. God made the wild animals and all those things. Now, what has God been doing? Creating. Now he's making. What is the difference? We kind of talked about that right from the very
He speaks it in
beginning.
when he creates it, but when he...
Do what?
Well, one of the things, he just speaks it that happens.
Yeah, well, he spoke this, and they came out of the earth. But there's a difference between made and created.
You gotta have ingredients to make.
Well, if you remember, one of the things we talked about in the beginning when we started was that humans can never create. We can make, because only God creates. Because to create, and the word that's used in the Bible, in the book of Genesis and all that, to create means to take nothing and make something. To make means to take something and make it into something else. So this was a make, right? Because what was there first? The earth. The animals came out of the earth. God made the animals, all the creatures and everything, from the earth. So they were made from the dust in the ground and not created. So that's one difference that we have now. And so anyway, moving right along with verse 26. Oh, and God saw that it was good. So far, everything's good. And remember, that word good is a word that is used only of God. And it's that same word that was used, I think I told you last week, or week before last. It's the same word that was used when the rich young man came up to Jesus and said, "Good teacher." And Jesus said, "Why do you call me good?" Because the guy was trying to fluff him up, flatter him. That's the word I was looking for. And Jesus could see through it and all of that. That's why he asked him that. But he said, only God is good. That's a word that they use for only God. And that's the word that's here, because it's a good that only God can do. So, verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image and our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, over all the creatures that move along the ground." And so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. So there's a weird view out there I want to put out there just so you know what it is. Did you notice that there's two different things said here about how humans came to be, just in this little passage? It has to do with what we just talked about. Yeah, verse 26 says, "Let us make man in our image." And verse 27 says, "God created." And actually in 27, he mentions create 3 times. So, now this view that's out there, and you might tell I don't really agree with that view, is that first people were made, just like the animals were made, from the dust to dust and all that. But then God decided to create within us the soul and all that. And part of it even comes from the fact that in the Old Hebrew, it says man, and then when we get to verse 28, it says the man. And so that there was a difference there. Now, some people think that then God created people like the animals and all that were outside of Eden, and they're out there roaming around and all that. I don't see any kind of biblical evidence for that at all. And I think this is just a God saying, okay, it's time for us to make man and to get to that point. And it was what he's saying in verse 26. But how is man, there are in 26 and 27, or 26, 27, 28, 26, 27, there are some unique differences to man and to how God creates, and or even in the aspect of God. So, do you notice anything here in the first line? It's been God said, God said, God said all the way through, and God did. And now what do we have?
He made it in his image.
Do what?
Put him in his image.
Well, that's part of it.
But
The-
who's let us?
Us. It becomes plural.
It's plural.
Let us make man in our image. Now, if you remember on the very first verse, in the beginning, God created. Now, I told you at that point that the word God was plural, but the created was a singular. And it's kind of a specific thing like that in the Hebrew. Now, Christians say that, that's the Trinity. Let us. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The same thing here. Jews see that as what's called the royal we. Do you ever use we or us when you're just talking about yourself? He does.
He does.
So some people do. Or somebody say, we'll be right back, and it's just them. or especially on, programs or different things, or when your mom said to you, "We need to take out the trash," was that a plural? No.
means somebody else.
Yeah,
Not me.
that means you are going to take out the trash. But that's what they call the royal we, that you speak as, you're speaking for everything and everybody. Now, there are some that say, this is all the heavenly creatures, God, the angels, all those things, but that doesn't really match because of what we talked about last time in Revelation, because there were all kinds of different creatures up there. So which one did he really make us look like? And which image? And we see that when we get to Revelation, that we've already seen that Jesus had the form of a person, that God was spoken of in the form of a person. And so, but that's actually a backwards statement, because God wasn't in the form of a person. The person is in the image of God. And so that is the difference. In all of the other, God said, let there be fish, and there's, and here's what they're going to look like, and some's going to have scales, they're going to have all these things, and I got an idea what I want a fish to look like. That's what it looks like. The livestock, the ones that crawl upon the ground. God came up with all those things in his mind, making all these different things. And one of the things that we could get into, we could spend a lot of time on it, and I've talked about it a couple times on Wednesday nights, is the food chain. And actually I got telling about it because one time last summer, I just got done with one of them, and Gail comes out the door and said, "Did you see that skunk that was 6 feet behind you?" I was sitting out on the patio. So next week I was kind of telling them, but we got talking about, that has a purpose. Buzzards, possums, catfish, all those things have a purpose in the food chain to clean up. And, even though they may be disgusting, that's their purpose. Take care of those deer Marty and I were talking about earlier. But God had that all put together. This is what it needs, all the way down to when things go back to the dust. It deteriorates, it returns to the ground, the worms eat it, all that kind of thing. And all of that food chain fit together, or what we call the food chain. And, that's people talk about it today, the ecological balance of everything together. If you get too much of this over here is going to suffer. If you let this get too low, this is going to suffer. And the whole global warming issues, but also, some of the fishery things, some of the other stuff, and all of that together. But God had a plan. God locked it all together. Now, the other thing to think about too is where does man fit into the whole scope of creation? Is he at the beginning?
The last.
He's at the last. So God made everything else in preparation for the person, for man.
I have a question. Humankind started with Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if they were dark skinned, light skinned. Where in the world did races come from if everything started from?
Well, some people think that, well, for one thing, where did black and brown and white, dogs and cows and horses and all that come from? Sometimes it has to do with genes. A lot of people think with people that it has to do with where in the world do you live? Because you can look at where people have lived, and the skin color kind of matches those areas. You take somebody that's a Nordic, the Baltic states, Denmark, Germany, and they are typically fair skin, blue up, because they weren't out in the sun much. There's not much sun up there, and they're always covered up. You take somebody from Africa that's in the sun all the time. What happens when we get out in the sun? You get darker and darker, and that being dark all the time like that's part of that little bit of evolution that your body just kept saying, I need to be dark. And so I started saying the melamine, but that's this stuff. The melatonin began to develop more, and that's that's part of all those things. And so that's where a lot of people think that it come from, or the people that went in certain areas had certain genetic strengths, that those things come out. Just the way that some of your kids, we do that with with animals. And actually, we're going to get into with Jacob. You know, he was smart enough to know that if you breed a spotted animal to a solid animal, you're probably going to get a spotted animal. And when he was getting all the spotted animals that were born, guess what he did? So, you know, some of those things happen, and all that's kind of where they think all that came from twice. Well, we don't know what everybody looked like before the flood. We just know that races developed after the flood. So we are made in God's image. That is the first thing that is different about people. Nothing else was made in God's image. God imagined what they were going to look like and made them according to the image that he had in his head, but not in God's image. And so when we see that, let us make man in our image, then that is the first differentiation. And we see that as the Trinity speaking. And once we're made in God's image, what else? Then what happens after that? What is our plan? This is God laying out the plan. This is not the creation yet. This is God laying out the plan, or stating the plan.
Rule over everything.
Let them rule over. Have dominion is actually a better way to put it there. Over what?
The fish and the birds and the livestock.
All the earth.
All creatures. All creatures.
If we are made in God's image, do we know then what God is looking?
Yeah, that was part of it, and that kind of comes to some of the things and some of the visions of God, that God appears to have a head and a body and all those. Yeah.
It's been passed down to
Yeah.
generations.
And that, whether, like they talk about the spitting image or something like that, not so much, but we are different than any other creature out there. And not just in the image, but one of the things as part of being, what's the other word? I'm trying to think of what the word is that's there. But basically, it doesn't mean just looks like somebody, but has the same characteristics, to the point that we have reason. When we talking about the fall of man, that to be able to make choices between good and bad and all of those things, and that we have after that we have an awareness. Life is short. Most animals don't have an awareness of what they call an awareness of life. Maybe the last couple of days, or if they're getting sick or they have issues or something like that, but through all their life, we know from the time we're kids that sometime or another we're going to die, and most animals don't have that, and that when it does talk of those, and Jesus even says, "If you've seen me, you've seen God," and like I said, Revelation speaks of God and about hair and faces and arms and legs and all of those things. So, and God's sitting on a throne, and all those things together. So we're going to be made in God's likeness, or as God's image, or as God's representation. And because some of them say like in His image and in His likeness, and there's a difference in those. One is how you look. One is how you are supposed to act. And you act just like your dad. What's the matter with you? I'll slap you into tomorrow. So, that kind of thing. No, nobody's ever said that, right?
No. Mine's I brought you in, I'll take you out.
Yeah. We had we actually talked about that this morning in Sunday school. We had somebody said, "I'll knock you in the next Wednesday." What do you think it's going to be like to wake up and find out it's Wednesday morning? But anyway, that's the difference in the two. One of them is how we look. The other one is what is within inside of us, the image or the likeness. And so then we're going to have dominion over all the creatures. And so, and that kind of goes back to even one of the Psalms says, what are we, Lord, that you put us above everything else, just a little bit above angels and all of those things as well. So everything was made, God set it all up, and then He put people there to be in charge of all of it. And that's when you doubt God's wisdom. No, seriously, God built everything to put people there. And that's what he's saying here, that because that's the whole thing. Does it say Him rule over it? No, it says them. So that is the point. Or to have dominion over it, which also means to use it and to take care of it, to rule it, and all of those things. To do it for man's benefit, not at the to not be abusive or anything like that, but for man's benefit. So it says in verse 27, God created man in his own image. Now, one of the things about the word man is ish, and that's also the word Adam that we're going to get into here in a little bit. That is a whole. That is not a name, by the way. That word actually means earthling or creature. It's when it talks about the earth, it's Adam and Adamah. Adam, Adam, is creature or earthling, and Adamah, Ah on the end of it, means creation or the. So you could say Adam's name is the creature of the creation, or the earthling from the earth, or the human from the humus. All of those things fit. But so here, God created man in his image. Now, one of the things that you're going to see is that, and it's one of those reasons that that as we get going forward, you're going to find that we speak that there's a couple of reasons that we use the word man here, because this man, the first word man, the first time it's used in 27, it is not gender specific. In the old Hebrew, there was no its or thems. Everything was either he or she. And the way that you spoke about it, there was not a he, a she, and a it. So everything, when they write everything, when you refer to something, it has to be a he or she. And they took he for, and that's just, most of the Spanish is another one, that everything has a, that's like el and la, if you take Spanish and all that, those sort of things. But in the Hebrew, they use man because that is both the male, but it is also the inclusive noun. Now, because when somebody talks about man or mankind, do you really think about gender, or do you think about people? But if they said womankind, what would you think?
Woman.
All the women. And that's, so that's not just a Hebrew thing. That's something that the way that even a lot of the Western cultures think about. And there's other ways that you do that too, that, somebody gets a mosquito on them and they go, what do they say? Did you get
Him.
him? What bit you?
Him.
A she. Only she mosquitoes bite. But nobody thinks about that. Or did they talk about shooting him down? And so when you say him, even today we say him. We don't mean it gender specific. And some people take it that way, but if you use she, the first thing you think about is gender, and so that's kind of the way it is through the Bible. And so there are some things that are gender specific, father, son. And sometimes he's and she's and all that, but nowhere, and the consistency of all of it, nowhere in the Bible is God spoken of as a she. And there's some other reasons we could get into that have to do with none of it is oppressive or anything like that. It has to do with role models and all that, and even as God is a disciplinarian, when it comes to authority figures. If when it comes to cops, we call them police men, and all those sort of things, and that men have a tendency to have more of a disciplined background when it comes to those kind of things than women do, and along the line and it's right through here, that whether you ever thought about it or not. Most violence in the world, it's like 70% of all violence in the world is created by males, and all of that. So that's part of it. And so So then those things and those people look up to male figures to correct those and to be in charge and all that. So it's kind of some of that social whatever or another that they call it, and but some of it just has to do with the way the language was written, that there is no gender neutral thing. And even if you say us, the us is either a male us or a female us. And it's, if you see the male us, that means everybody. But if you said the female us, everybody sees that as just the females. So you're going to see that going through here. So this one is man. There was a male and a female, Isha, but this one is man. This is actually also plural. So God created all people in his own image. In the image of God, he created. How many of your Bibles say him? How many of your Bibles say them? Them is the correct translation. So if you got a him, you need to mark it down. And
Part of the verse it is him, part of it says them.
yeah, but that's the whole thing. And that was the next line we were getting to. So God created man in his own image, mankind, all people in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. Now, God's created other things also. Has it ever been repeated that God created? It says God created. There was, it was good. This time, we see the word created 3 times. Why do you think that is? Created him in his image. In his image, he created them, male and female. He created them. So, are you like other animals? Nope. In the Hebrew and the Greek, both, in other words, the Old Testament and the New Testament, and languages those were written, they did not have punctuation points. They will say things. If you want to make a punctuation, you say it twice, and you can see that in the Psalms. They'll say it and they'll repeat it. And they may say, it's like, it was a cloudless day, and then the next line may say that the sky was clear. When they, that's kind of a simple thing, but that's how they do it. So here they emphasized it, and what did they do again? They emphasized it again, that you understand that you are created in God's image. God made you. And even today, when you go up against evolution, that you didn't come from a monkey. 3 times it's telling you here, God created you. He created you in his image. He created you, whether you're male. Well, no, let me rephrase that. He created you male, and he created you female in his own image. So, is God male or female? No. No, God is basically gender neutral, but we call him Father and all that. But in other words, what did God say with all these other animals back here?
It is good.
Well, not just that. He said, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the water of the seas. So, all the rest of them, he told them to increase and increase. How do people what do you have to be able to increase in numbers? Male and female. So in other words, and this is one of those things that kind of pulls societies apart, it pulls churches apart, denominations apart, it separates one denomination from another. God created us male and female. God created us. And so if you're changing what God created, or you don't believe that what God created was right, then you're not trusting in God and looking to God. So God created them male and female. The other part of it is, and actually it's in some, he didn't make, there was no it's. There was, and the reason that they have that is some people said, oh, well, in the beginning, God created everybody male and female, not males and females. One person, male and female. And that's a real stretch. But sometimes people try to, it's one of those things like we've talked about before. Sometimes if you have You have an idea, and we talked about this morning, that's part of the point of the church. You have an idea, you can go and you can find little phrases here and snippets there to kind of make things sound like the way you want them. And that's where somebody else comes along and says, no, that's not what it says. And so everybody, we are made in the image of God. So we are different from other creation because we are made in God's image. We are different from other creation because we have dominion over them. That the earth is for man, and not man for the earth, not people for the earth. Now, we are to take care of it and all those sort of things. But God created everything and put people here, and basically, and we're going to see that as much later on. Said, here it is, it's for you. Take care of it. He did add that in there. So anyway. That's also the image of God is in God doing, because what's God been doing all along? He's been creating, he's been making, he's been doing all these things. And so as part of the image of God is not the animals just live, the livestock graze, and at this point everything's grazing, living, and just kind of hanging out, so to speak. But people are to be doing, because we are in the image of God, and God started off with doing. So verse 28. So God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. So he said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, just like he did with all the animals. And so they had to be male and female, fill the earth. Just same thing that he said to all the rest of them. So, and that fits with God just making two. Then it's going to take a lot more than two. But also it's kind of a, what they call that, a perpetual kind of statement. And God, when it says male and female, he created them, that creation keeps going. So we're blessed, and we are given a command. What is the first command that people are given in the Bible? Yep, be fruitful and multiply. And what's number 2? Subdue it, rule over it, and be over all the creatures. You don't think about much like that, about ruling over them, but because we live in a society in which we don't think much about animals and wild animals. When Jessie was in junior high, she went to church camp one year, and at church camp, it was international camps. I was supposed to go to seminary for 2 weeks, and one of those weeks she was supposed to be at church camp. Somebody got sick, so I had one of my weeks of vacation canceled, so I couldn't go. But the week she was going to camp, I still had a week of vacation, so I went down as one of the camp counselors. And what international camp was is they brought all these international kids in from Asbury University to be camp counselors, and they came from all over the world. There were Hong Kong, there was 3 from Africa, and I don't remember where the rest of them were from. But and then every night, as we kind of sat around, we go over to where the pool was, and this was printed. We slept in tents and cooked on fires and all that kind of stuff. It was camping, but every night, then they would tell what it was like to be a Christian in their country, and it was like I said, it was pretty cool. It kind of woke up some of those kids. But one of those days, this is in Gnawbone. Now, you know where Gnawbone is? Mm-hmm. It's just outside of Nashville. If you go down to Nashville, Indiana, and go like you're going to Columbus, there's a little sign out there that says Gnawbone, and Camp Manito's off to the north, way back in there. And so anyway, they're taking them on a hike one morning. So one guy's out in the front, and there's a guy and there's different. I said, I'll bring up the rear. That's no big deal. So I'm back there, and I'm with these 2 ladies from Africa, and we're walking through. This is Native Indiana woods. These things haven't been logged out, but the trees were so big and so the canopy was so thick that there was nothing on the ground. There was no brush, there was no anything, and it was clean walking, and so we're going along. One of those girls, and this gal's about 25, and she's constantly going like that, and she kept asking, "Are there any lions out here? Are there any lions out here?" No, there's no lions here. Every time you'd hear a noise, the birds or a squirrel ruffle in the leaves, she'd jump and say, "Are there any lions out here?" Now, when's the last time anybody in Indiana, besides that girl, ever thought about lions? But that was part of it. But you know, there was a time when there were lions around here. And we came in, we took over, we subdued it. Well, we got dominion over things, but you know, either killed them off or run them out, and all of those things. So those things happen, and some of that has been done, and that's part of it, and rule over it all. So, and one of the things I wanted to mention too, back in this day, everything got along, you know, because we're going to see that again, that everything was vegetarian. You know, the lions, tigers, and the bears, and all of them. So, verse 29, then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the air, and all the creatures that move on the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. So, everything was, and everybody was vegetarian, and all the animals, everything. And God said, you know, did God tell them, okay, you know, there's food out there, you just have to go find it? He said, no. Why is there food there? I give you every tree. I made it for you. I have provided to feed you. And if it's growing off the trees, what do you have to do to take care of it? Not a whole heck of a lot. You go and you pick what you want and what you need. And seed-bearing plants, so, you know, that whether they're talking about, you know, things like wheat or corn or grains or just exactly what it is. Or they're talking berries and that kind of stuff, doesn't matter. God said, you know, I give you these things. And you can kind of see that God said, you're supposed to subdue it. I made it. I'm giving it to you. God transfers that ownership of all of these things to the man and the woman. So I give you every seed-bearing plant and the whole earth and every tree with fruit and seed in it. They are yours for food. So God said, I fed you. I've already done it. I've made it possible. You don't have to worry about food, and because it's there. And you don't have to worry about being afraid of lions, because I've also given all these things for them to eat. So they don't have to worry, but they're not going to come looking at you, because he said all the beasts, all the birds, all the creatures that slither on the ground, and everything that has a breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. So it's kind of written in the way that every plant is made to be food for something, you know, which is kind of an interesting thought too. You know, it may not be something that we eat. Anybody eat acorns? They're poisonous if you eat enough of them, but what eats them? Squirrels, the deer, the coons, the turkeys. You know, even though we can't eat them, and there's all kinds of stuff like that out there. You know, one year I had a dogwood tree that had all kinds of red berries on it. And when I was living in Clinton, I just happened to be looking out the back window, because I don't work shift work. I was off during the day. And here come, this was in the fall, here come a swarm of robins, and in about 3 minutes, every berry off of that tree was gone, and off they went again. People don't eat those berries, but the robins sure did. So that's kind of the way that it's written. Almost every green plant that's out there that was created at that time was made to be food for something. So God didn't just make this animal and say, well, what am I going to feed it? God made the animal. He made the food to go with it, and all those things together. So, you know, it all ties together. It all comes, it's part of that order. You know, we talked about it in the beginning, that the whole point of the creation story is God takes chaos and turns it into order. And that's what we have today. We talked about that with the stars, that, for thousands and thousands of years, stars have been in the same order. People navigate from them, all those sort of things. So, God's created creation. He's created us in His image. Now He has delegated the creation to us. So God saw all that He had made, and it was it good?
There's
Nope.
Very good.
It was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, day number 6. Day 6 is the biggie. And we move into chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. In other words, it's like John says in the Gospel of John, writing about the creation, about Jesus, that everything that was made through Him, and there's nothing that was made that He didn't make. That's kind of what it's saying here. All the heavens, remember that's plural. How many heavens are there?
3.
3. And the one of God's abode, what we call outer space, and our air that we breathe. So all the heavens, all the earth, completed in all their vast array. In other words, everything is, and the way that it's set up, God didn't leave it undone. God didn't leave anything undone. So, verse 2, by the 7th day, God had finished the work that He had been doing. And so on the 7th day, He rested from all His work. And God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it He rested from all the work of creating that He had done. So, 7th day, God rested. He had finished it by day 6, and so on day 7, He rested. Do you think God really needed to rest?
He probably didn't, but I would.
She said he wouldn't, but she would. But there's a couple ways of looking at this. Part of it is, and sometimes I'm guilty of that with some of the things that I make. And I got a friend that's really, he'll make something and he'll get it all done, and he'll sit in a chair and look at it for about a day and a half, just proud of what he's done. Now I don't spend that, but I do sit back when I make something in the shop or whatever, then I take time to admire what I made and to think about it and how good it looks. And sometimes I see things I should have done different. It doesn't say God had those same kind of thoughts, but unless He was looking at me, I don't know. But so I think that's part of it. That God sat back and to look at everything He'd done, because as verse 1 says, there wasn't anything left to do. That's the other point of it. God was done. It was completed. There was nothing left to do. If there had been anything left to do, He would have had to have done it on day 7. So there was nothing left to do. Now, the English and all of that, where it says on the 7th day He rested from all His work, is kind of, the Hebrew is kind of difficult. It says from the work which He created. In other words, what it's really saying here, and it kind of comes along with the last line that we have here in this on verse 3, that He rested from all the work of creating that He had done. From that point on, God does not create again with the same word of creation. So God did it. It wasn't just good, it was very good. So if it's very good, you're done. And that's the whole point, is that God didn't do it complete or incomplete. God completed it. God got it going. God had the full plan. Everything's linked together. There is nothing left to do. It is in its total entirety completed, and it is very good. In other words, at that point in time, it was perfect. There is nothing left to do, because nothing's left unfinished. Nothing was left imperfect. It's all very good. And if good is used about God only, then very good is that's the perfection of perfection type thing. So that's the whole point. So God sat back and took that time to say, it is done. Now, when you look forward to the to the Ten Commandments, and it's remembering the Sabbath, keeping it holy, and all that. That is as much as a look back to this to say that remember, you were created by God in God's image. And so part of the way the Jews look at the Sabbath and honoring the Sabbath isn't even so much about just not working on that day, because the Ten Commandments, it is to remember that you have a creator, God is in charge, and that you are honoring the creator and remembering the creator by taking that time of Sabbath and all that together. So
How come we don't do that anymore?
actually, there's two reasons. One of them, most Jewish scholars will tell you that the Ten Commandments were never aimed at anybody except Jews. Because if you look at the whole of it in the story that's there in the whole context, it is, if you're going to be my people, these are the things you have to do. I brought you out of Egypt. I defeated Pharaoh. I brought you to this point. And so this is my part of the covenant. I brought you here to be my people. Do you want to be my people? If you're going to do this, do these things. And all of that with that group that was there, and it says in their generations. And so some think that is that way. Now, what's probably more relevant is the whole view. I used to have an old buddy that he would pray on, if he was praying on Sunday, he would thank God for this Sabbath day. And he was flat out wrong, because Sabbath is Saturday. Friday night, remember in here, there was evening, there was morning. Sabbath every day starts at dusk the day before. So Sabbath starts at dusk on Friday, goes till dusk on Saturday. Christians, what do we celebrate? We celebrate on the first day of the week because every Sunday is a commemoration of Easter. We have the one big Easter, but we celebrate on Sundays because that is the day of the week that Christ came out. That's why it's called the Lord's Day. Saturday is the Sabbath. Sunday is the Lord's Day. And so we celebrate on Sunday, or we worship on Sunday. That's the holy day. Now, there are those that would say that, that Sunday ought to be in that way as well. And if you remember the old Andy, I was trying to think who told me that, but it was the Malones that went to Mayberry over at Danville last night. We were talking about it a little bit this morning. But, one of the things with the old Andy Griffith shows, what were they always doing on Sunday? Sitting on the front porch. Usually Andy's strumming the guitar, Barney's sitting there singing off key. And so all the men folk were arrested. Who wasn't?
Women.
Aunt Bee's in there cooking herself to death, to feed everybody and all that kind of thing.
Nothing changes.
Now it does. Everybody goes to the restaurant. Which I will tell you, and we're just about out of time, but I will tell you this. One of the things used to just aggravate the dickens out of me was to have somebody that was a Christian, or especially ministers, that would get up and preach these condemnation sermons about people working on Sunday. Nobody should work on Sunday, and when church is over, they go to a restaurant. So you're going there to, and you know what? If enough people didn't go to restaurants, what do you think would happen? They'd be closed on Sunday. So you're keeping that restaurant open. You're asking people to work for you, and all that kind of stuff. The other thing they used to laugh about when I first went to Eugene, because I got a ski boat. I don't know I think Brian was like 5 or 6. And so I'd come up to Eugene. Well, the minister they'd had before me went to Salem, which is down by Eli Lilly. So from Salem to 36, we were on the same road. But the guy that was there would always, because he lived out here this side of Montezuma on the country. So he'd come down, he'd go across 36, and he'd go up 63, and all these boats are headed for the lake. And they were always talking, he always thought they ought to need to be in church. They need to be in church. And so they used to always laugh on whether, if I passed him on 63, I'd be going towards 36 if he count, because he would tell them, I passed 13 boats headed for the lake. Those people said, I wonder if he counted you, because I was headed for church. We'd go up church, then we'd change clothes at the church, and we'd hit remember when there used to be a Hardee's down here? We'd hit the Hardee's because we didn't like the Burger King. and would go out to the lake. But that's kind of one of those things, and well, I guess we're not going. That's in Exodus, but that's kind of the view. There probably should be that, but it's also one of those things that you know the where do if you really draw that line. And Jesus said, let me back that up too. You know, when we talked about everything being made for man, Jesus even said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the most important thing is people. So if you really believe nobody should work on the Sabbath, then all the cops get the day off, all the firemen get the day off,
No
all the guys working in the
electricity.
generation plants get the days off, the hospitals get the day off, the nursing homes get the day off. How many of you going to go and work take care of somebody at the nursing home so everybody can be off that day and all those things? So, you know, it's one of those that just kind of from practicality now, you know, do you go and hoop it up and all that? The whole point is everybody's supposed to take a day to rest, rejuvenate. But I'll kind of tell you too that if I had to go home on Sunday and sit all day long, they'd just about be carrying me out by the end of the day. I get my studying done today, and I was out in the yard doing stuff because I sat about as long as I could sit. So anyway, that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but
It makes sense.
that's the
I
point.
remember when I was younger, if you didn't have something on a Sunday.
Oh yeah, none of the stores were open. A lot of gas stations weren't open, and there's some places that still do. Hobby Lobby,
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A. There's others besides those two that are still where. Yep. So there's some that still do that, and it doesn't look like it hurts their bottom line any. I know it's not hurt Chick-fil-A's because I've never seen so many people sitting in the line. Whew. But anyway, well, hope you all have a good evening. We will pick up with the first of the Toledotes next time, and if you want to know what that means, you'll have to be here next time. So hope you have a blessed week and that you learned something tonight, and take it with you, and we'll catch you next time. All right, let me shut this off.